first slide here. This is a bezoar. There are more than one kind. This is a mineral bezoar. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Ron Weasley drinks poisoned mead, and Harry scrambles around and finds a bezoar and pushes it down his throat, and so was credited with saving his life. You may know that bezoars are real. They are formed in the chambered stomachs of goats and cattle, and they were very valued in medieval times as magical things. They were treasured, and many times for people who were wealthy and were the most likely people to have one, they dressed them up like this in gold and jewels and made them very fancy. This one's a pretty good one, actually. This one was a monster.
I know before you said something.
I wonder what poor cow had to afford that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that would have been down from.
That wouldn't have been pleasant, no. For the smaller ones, oftentimes they were made into rings like this. And the rings were dipped in one's drink and supposedly rendered the drink safe to drink and canceled out any harmful poisons that it might contain. What you may not know is that bezoars actually do work, but not on plant poisons. So if Ron had gotten some nightshade in his mead, he would not work. They work on one kind of poison only, they work on arsenic. There's a chemical reaction with a mineral bezoar and arsenic that will render it safe, or at least safer.
I'm assuming you have to kill the animals to get the bezoar out.
Basically.
Not gonna like.
They get them from animals that they sell, I'm sure. I don't know of any way to get something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, passing that thing, but not.
I recommend.
They were small.
There aren't any more handouts, so please share, when it comes to making our protective amulets, maybe you can share with someone who has one. So I wouldn't bet my life on bezoar, but this is the grain of truth in the mythology that they cancel poisons out. I want to talk, before we talk about poisons any further, I want to tell you just a little bit about amulet making and what we're going to do. Amulets can be made in beautiful, exotic, and gorgeous containers, but what we're doing here are simple folk magic amulets or protection sachets. They're quick, they're inexpensive, they're made with the materials you have on hand. They're still powerful. But you don't have any ashwagandha in the house, get something else out of your pantry, out of your garden, or in the back acre. And because it is your intent that creates a protection amulet. Folk magic believes that everyone, regardless of their personal faith or their skill, has this kind of magic within them. It's suggested you use 3, 7, or 9 herbs in your amulet. These are the power numbers. And the paper I've given you, I just drew up kind of what I saw as in my research as the most common powers that each of these herbs has. And yes, I do know that salt is not a herb. It's in there because it boosts the strength of certain herbs such as cumin. But this paper is just a guideline. When you're making your amulet, use your intuition. Go with your gut, and when you choose your herbs, and decide then also what your intent for your amulet is. Do you want to put it in your car for safe travels, carry it in your pocket so you don't catch the flu, put it over your doorway to turn away thieves or your ex or whatever you don't want to deal with? What it protects is going to be up to you, what you visualize when you make it. So I gave this to you ahead so you can choose your herbs and your intent. Well, I tell you a few stories of poison plants and poisonings, and we'll start with a story about a poison. The first known serial killer was a scientist, herbalist, and poisoner named Locusta in 1st century Rome. Murders were not uncommon in Rome. Yeah, exactly. And poison was popular. Locusta was notorious for making poisons for those who had the money to pay. Sorry. In 54 AD, she was in prison when the Emperor Claudius's wife Agrippina came for a secret visit. She wanted to know how to kill her husband. Locusta gave her some instructions. Claudius died. In the reign of Nero, who followed him, she became the first contract killer. And she became very wealthy and very notorious, had money, lands, and eventually had a school of poison where she taught others her arts. Eventually, she and her students probably killed over 1,000 people experimenting on them, usually slaves and prisoners and so forth. However, everything changed for Locusta in 68 AD because that's when Nero committed suicide. And his successor, Galba, lost no time in executing her and her minions.
That sucks for her.
That was she paid for there. There are really too many poisonous plants to tell you all of them, so I'm just going to go over a few and talk a little bit about the poisons and how they've been used through the ages and tell a few stories. This one will be familiar to you. Remus Lupin depended on a potion made by Severus Snape to control the symptoms of his werewolf transformation. The main ingredient was aconite, also known as and oh, well done, 10 points. Around 1850 in Scotland, a rash of aconite poisonings took place. The cause, it seemed, was a love of horseradish. Here's another picture of aconite, and this shows you the monk's hoods, the shape of the flower that looks like a monk's big, heavy hood. This is horseradish.
You want to go back to the one?
Yeah, no problem. There's one so pretty. It's beautiful. I have it in my yard. I never touch it. Or rarely touch it, I should say. Gloves are best. In 1856, in Dingwall, Scotland, a servant was sent out for horseradish root. Apparently, horseradish root and aconite root look very alike. There's horseradish. This is horseradish root, and this was the best I could do for aconite root, but you can see that it's also round and thick. Apparently, some people couldn't tell the difference. In 1856, a servant was sent out for horseradish root. Somehow brought in aconite. You wouldn't think they'd plant them together, would you?
Yeah, do you know if the aconite root has that function itself?
Has what?
Has horseradish.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that you've been able to tell the difference. That's exactly right. Somehow he managed to bring in aconite root, and the cook, even more strangely, grated it into her horseradish meat sauce without even, without noticing anything was wrong. It was a festive dinner, and the two priests who were guests of honor both died, and one other man died. The rest of the party got very, very sick, but survived. There was an inquest centered on the cook, because when you grate horseradish, it remains white. If you grate aconite, it turns pink with the air. Evidently, though she was greatly suspected, the cook was never convicted and never confessed. So that murder remains a mystery. Europe in the Middle Ages had a lot of superstitions, and among them the fear of werewolves. People had discovered that a mixture of aconite solution, honey, and ground glass could poison meat, and they would leave this in the woods for wolves, who I guess they considered they might get the werewolves that way. They also went hunting for the wolves, or the werewolves, with having dipped their arrows into aconite solution. Between these kind of shenanigans in hunting down the wolves, they very nearly killed off all the wolves in certain parts of the world. Just about completed the population. My next one is white baneberry. White baneberry is native to the eastern part of the U.S. I don't know if any of you who live around here have seen it in the wild. It's called doll's eyes, which I have to confess creeps me out.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this. They look like eyes, and it would be very creepy to see a poison that could kill you also looking, in my opinion. But doll's eyes are actually being endangered in this part of the U.S. because people are harvesting these from the wild and using them in their landscaping. They last a long time, and I guess they think they're pretty. All parts of the plant are poisonous to the cardiac sedative, and if you get enough of it, you'll simply go into cardiac arrest, which I personally wouldn't want in my landscaping. Apparently that is a problem. In folklore, doll's eyes repelled plague and repelled rodents, but somehow it attracted and summoned toads. That might have been helpful to know. Keep Trevor under control. The next four poisonous plants are known as witches' weeds. This is complicated. I did not load my own papers. I will not tell someone. Okay, I'm kidding. They're known as witches' weeds or witching herbs. Witches' weed. Some are called witches' weeds or witching herbs. They have a lot of, they're related to witches. They're used to heal, harm, and hallucinate. There are some plants of the genus Solanaceae that are rock stars. Potatoes, tomatoes, habanero chili peppers. We love those, but then there are some others. Atropa belladonna, known as deadly nightshade. It's a hallucinogenic poison. It causes blurred vision, staggering, slurred speech, initially looks like drunkenness, but if enough has been consumed, it will move on to convulsions, coma, and death. Atropa, in mythology, was one of the three fates, the goddess sisters who controlled everybody's lifespan. Atropa held the big shears that snipped the threads of life. The two main compounds in belladonna are atropine and scopolamine. They're useful medications if they're used the right way and the right concentration. But ingested only a few of these black berries, which are sweet tasting, can kill. Women in the Italian Renaissance used a solution of belladonna to drop in their eyes to dilate. They believed it made them more attractive and more approachable. If used often, though, the toxicity would begin to damage the vision. It's said that the timeless allure of the Mona Lisa is due in part to belladonna-induced dilated pupils, like this. Oh, that's alluring. Perhaps it was back then. Next we have, when you'll know, the mandrake. This is what the mandrake looks at from the top. Looks like on the top. It's also a nightshade, and it has the root that looks very muted.
Do you grow mandrake?
I don't yet.
I really want to, and I'm curious farming.
I need to talk to, I know a couple of people who can pass it actually do all of these things, and I need to talk to them.
I feel like I need to contact you. Like,
Okay, we'll exchange.
I'm really interested because
That's, yeah, anybody who wants to talk further after this, I'd love
one
to.
of you that I don't grow, but I just want to.
You got it. I can ask him, or I can just give you his Instagram because he's really friendly. Okay, mandrake. The root looks very human, and that has led to any number of fables about it being a new being, or being male and female, and so forth. It was believed that the mandrake would scream when pulled up, and that scream would be fatal. Here is the method, one method, of safely harvesting mandrake that I found in an Old English herbal written by a monk about 1000 AD. Do not harvest mandrake on a windy day or after sunset. Draw a circle around it with an iron tool, lest it flee from you. Cut off the top, facing west. Dig until you see the hands and feet, and then bind them. Then tie the other end around a black dog's neck, being sure, first of all, that the dog is hungry. Throw meat so that the dog must pull up the mandrake in order to eat it, and you run. And hopefully you can outrun the screams.
I think they had something like that at the, when they did the British Museum of Harry Potter.
They did, I saw that, or I saw it online, I didn't get to attend. But this is an illustration of, well, they didn't use a black dog here. This is basically what a lot of sources will say was the old way of pulling mandrake. Make the dog do it. Mandrake has numbing qualities and was sometimes used in the early days of surgery. They would have the patient chew mandrake as an anesthetic. Datura here is an attractive plant that often is grown for its long trumpet-shaped flowers. Like that. They're called devil's trumpets because of the spikes on the edges. Got it? In 1676, there was a colony in Jamestown, Virginia, but we were still controlled by Britain. British troops were called in to put down an uprising in the colony. The settlers were not fans, and they put datura flowers in the soldiers' food. Amazingly, no one died, but it was quite a circus. The soldiers acted bizarrely for days before they finally regained their wits, having almost no memory of what had happened. So datura has since then been known as Jamestown weed or Jimson weed. Then there is black henbane. It's also known as fetid nightshade for its foul odor, and the odor is also said to cause dizziness and confusion if you breathe it for any length of time. In Alnwick Poison Garden, which is in England, which we'll talk about more in a minute, there's a bench kept next to the henbane, and they claim to have several faintings a week during tourist season. Surgery in medieval times. It was a terrifying prospect. The patient could go through terrible suffering.
What was this plant called again?
Black henbane.
Oh.
It's also a nightshade, also has the same hallucinogenic and chemicals. Henbane was used in what was called a soporific sponge in medieval times. A sea sponge was soaked in a solution of henbane, and they usually included a few other plants like opium poppy and aconite or mandrake to get the numbing and the pain lessening. The sponges were dried, and then they were dampened just before use, put over the nose and mouth of the patient, and had them breathe through it until they lapsed into a coma. The resulting coma could last for a day or two, long enough for the surgery to be all over with and healing to begin, and that was the ideal situation. Sometimes they woke too soon. Sometimes they didn't wake up at all. It was a dangerous combination. So belladonna, mandrake, datura, and black henbane. These four were common ingredients in what is known as flying ointment, or lycanthropic or shape-shifting ointment. These are old medieval sketches of what they imagined people on flying ointment were doing.
Is it when the other supposed ingredients have bad beans?
That's what I was just going to say. Coming right up. Yeah. Okay. Some
Which were the herbs for the fly?
Pardon me?
Which were the herbs for the fly?
The four I've just spoken of, the nightshades, belladonna, mandrake, datura, and black henbane were very common. At least one or more of the nightshades were used in it. Some recipes did claim to use the fat of children freshly dug from their graves, which is really gruesome. But more likely, It was usually an animal fat that was used as the carrier, and mixed with a solution of one or more of the nightshades, and then often with others such as opium poppy, aconite, cannabis, and so forth. It's quite a combination. But this is not taken internally, it's rubbed into the skin. Let's see what else we've got. I think I have another illustration.
And Louis the Witch has a really good,
Is it?
yeah.
Who's in it, or how else can I identify?
It's a really brutal scene, but
They do
there's a
flashback.
witch that steals a baby.
Oh,
But it's the very beginning of it, but it's about kind of the old mythology of witches during
It's just called a witch, called it for it.
Yeah, witches. I was making me watch that movie when I was 4.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
no, this is a new film. Okay, yeah, it's called The Witch, but it's like.
You probably, yeah, there's more than
The
one
one with
witch.
Angelica Houston? I thought you
Oh, no.
Yeah.
This is
I watched it when I was 4, and then I had nightmares for a week and a half.
She'd be really scary for 4
Like,
years.
even just seeing the poster, you see her.
Mhm.
Okay, so,
That's spooky. You're talking about alignment. I'm sorry, I lost my place for a moment. I'm more interested in talking to everybody. Okay, so the people who observed others who had used the flying ointment watched them go into a death-like trance. When they woke up, they would tell stories of having flown through the air among the stars, attended elaborate banquets, gone to listen to enchanted music in the arms of a beautiful lover, or felt fur and feathers sprout from their skin as they shapeshifted. They had all kinds of beautiful, wonderful stories to tell, except for those who never woke up. And that happened too. The bottom line about all of these is they were not able to regulate how much of the drug they were getting. And the line between effective and lethal is sometimes very, very close. And so a lot of people who use flying ointment, even those today who do experiment with it, have died as a result. The House of Medici, I'll move on to this. The House of Medici was a political Italian family in the 1500s, about whom it was said that their enemies tended to die at the most convenient times. Perhaps best known was Catherine de Medici here, who in the 1600s married the French king, Henry II. It was said that her room contained small chests of horror, filled with her considerable collection of pine poisons. So after marrying and moving to the French royal court, the new Queen Catherine introduced perfumed gloves known as sweet gloves. It looked something like this. They became all the rage at court. And people were very honored when the queen would gift her favorites with a pair of sweet gloves. But sometimes she gifted her enemies with them as well. And their enemies tended to die off soon after receiving the gloves. Catherine took the secret of the exact plant poison she used, or the combination of, to her grave. We don't know exactly, but the sweet gloves may have been the first known poison to clothing. The infamous Medici poison garden still exists in Italy, and caught the interest of the Duchess of Northumberland, who lives in Alnwick Castle in England. If you remember, Alnwick Castle was shown on both the first 2 Harry Potter films. When Harry and his classmates took their first flying lesson, that was done in one of the courtyards at Alnwick. And they still give lessons there today to tourists who want to learn to fly. But the Duchess was charmed by the idea of a poison garden. She thought it would particularly interest children and keep their attention a little longer. Awesome. So she created her own poison garden at Alnwick. It has about 100 dangerous or lethal plants. People can only go in a few at a time. Gated up nicely. And there's somebody always accompanies them. They're told, don't touch, don't taste, and try not to breathe. While they walk through and are told all the fascinating stories of the poisons.
There's another really amazing poison garden at the Library Council.
I've read of that one as well. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I haven't traveled to either Italy or Ireland yet, but hopefully one day. Some of the plants that are restricted by law, such as cannabis and opium poppy, as well as some other ones that are really dangerous to even brush against, are grown in cages like this. I'm not sure what's caged there, but they are required to keep their cannabis caged up. It is important that poison plants be preserved, such as in these poison gardens. A poison garden is also a medicine garden, and new medicinal uses are being found for plants that once were only killers. And more research is being done all the time, particularly with cancer therapies, and they have actually found some real enlightenment with some of these that used to seem to be only evil. And that is about all I have to talk about as far as poisons. Do you have questions? We'll move on to making amulets then. These are protective amulets, and as I said at the beginning, the amulet follows your intent and what you visualize the amulet doing. If you want protection against the flu that's going around, carry it on your person and think about your visualization. Visualize and think about your intent while you make the amulet. I have my herbs back here on the table. Yes, I do know that salt is not an herb. But we're going to use, when you make your amulet, take a piece of the white cloth. It is white for the purity of your herbs, because you're working on protection. Use an equal amount of each herb you're going to do. Either put 3 herbs in, 7 in, or 9 in. Those are the numbers of power. And please don't mix up the spoons. Try really hard not to do that so you don't contaminate the herb for somebody else's amulet if they maybe don't want the same ones you have. You'll need a partner to hold your amulet while you tie it off. But only you, the owner of the amulet, ties it off. They can just hold the cloth together when you tie it. There's red string back there. And all the while you're doing this, from the time you pick up your cloth, fill it, and tie it, think about your visualization, think about your purpose. Concentrate on the purpose of the amulet. Once tied, your amulet should never be opened again. When the time comes that you feel its purpose is finished, it should ideally be buried. But whatever you do to dispose of it, it stays closed forever.